Happy Halloween, everyone, and welcome to Horror According to Chris Wyatt. For today's whole story episode, we're taking a look at the Final Destination series. Many horror franchises, especially slasher flicks, are based around seeing characters being killed in unique or creative ways. Typically, it's at the hands of one or maybe a few brooding killers, but the Final Destination series has a unique angle. What if the characters were pursued by death itself? As in, death as a concept or force. At the very least, I'll give them points for creativity. By the way, I won't give away every detail about these films, but there definitely will be some spoilers ahead. Each film in the series follows a similar plot. They begin with a group of characters, mostly teens or college students, where one of which has a premonition of some major disaster which claims the lives of dozens of people. When they come back from their premonition, they, alongside a few others, end up narrowly avoiding the said disaster and manage to escape with their lives. At least at first. Death, seemingly not content with the said group escaping their fate, picks them off one by one afterwards in a series of apparently bizarre freak accidents. There's no real villain in the film, at least no human villain. The closest thing is a funeral home director named William Bloodworth, played by renowned character actor Tony Todd.
In death, there are no accidents, no coincidences, no mishaps, and no escapes.
Aside for giving some cryptic messages about cheating death, little is known about Bloodworth. It's even been theorized that he's the Grim Reaper himself, though no movie has confirmed that so far. The first movie was released in 2000 and directed by James Wong. High school student Alex Browning, played by Devon Sawa, has the first premonition of his classmates and teachers dying in a plane crash. Alex and a few others manage to escape, but death soon starts picking off the survivors, leaving Alex to try and discover death's patterns so they may actually live another day. Now, I'll be honest, I wasn't wild about this one the first time I saw it, which was back when I was in high school. There is some good stuff, to be sure. The premise was intriguing and fairly unique. There are some genuinely suspenseful scenes, and Tony Todd is amazing in it because, well, he's Tony Todd. But the series was still trying to find its way. A lot of the story elements didn't really add up. The characters were hardly creative. Actors who weren't Tony Todd were nothing special. And while some of the death scenes were creative, others not as much. Not a bad movie, though, and an interesting start to what would become a franchise. Final Destination 2 was released in 2003 and directed by David R. Ellis. Ali Larter reprises her role from the previous film, along with Tony Todd, who shows up for another cameo. The big, catastrophic event this time isn't a plane crash, but rather a highway collision. And, okay, I won't lie, the whole highway sequence is probably the coolest thing filmed in the series. Its only problem, though? It might be too good. Nothing else that interesting happens throughout the rest of the movie. It may have set the bar way too high. I'll admit that there were some creative death scenes, namely one involving pigeons, but the series was quickly becoming even more nonsensical and made even less sense. Final Destination 2 is in some ways better than its predecessor, and in some ways a little worse. Final Destination 3 arrived in 2006. And I have to admit, I actually really enjoyed this one. Oh, it's far from perfect, but this was the first film in the series to find a working balance between creative death scenes, a goofy premise played just straight enough, and some genuine suspense. James Wong returned to the director's chair once again, and the event that kicks off this sequel is a fatal roller coaster accident. The said roller coaster accident doesn't quite compare to the highway pileup in Part 2, but it still offers some memorable carnage, and the following death scenes are probably the best in the series. Once again, the cast isn't anything special, but the two leads, Mary Elizabeth Winstead and Ryan Merriman, actually do hold their own fairly well. The only real bummer in this movie is no Tony Todd. I feel like if he made an appearance, this movie could have been great instead of just good. Still, Final Destination 3 is my pick for the best in the series, despite a few flaws. So yeah, after Part 3, I had definitely come around to this series, and was even looking forward to the next one. Too bad it turned out to be such a disappointment. The fourth film, entitled The Final Destination, which is a really stupid title by the way, was released in 2009, once again directed by Final Destination 2 filmmaker David R. Ellis. By this point, the series had just become predictable, the characters are even less memorable, the ending was uninspired, and no Tony Todd again. Even most of the death scenes in this one weren't really all that memorable. I had to look up what happened because it just did not leave much of an impression. The big event this time is a race car crash, which was okay, but probably the least interesting or suspenseful major event in the series. By this point, the series had become too by the numbers, and The Final Destination is easily the worst entry. Fortunately, when Part 5 was released in 2011, it did actually manage to deliver on some of the series' promise once again. Final Destination 5, directed by Stephen Quayle, did manage to get the series back on track somewhat, and is probably the second best film after Part 3. The major event in this one is a collapsing bridge. Final Destination 5 even returned to the series' darker roots, and kept a mostly serious tone, more akin to the first film after the sequels had become increasingly sillier. The death scenes are actually pretty damn suspenseful. They usually involve some small item that ends up having major consequences. For example, one whole scene involves a gymnast in danger of stepping on a screw. The formula hasn't changed too much, and the actors are still mostly subpar, but they did at least give some of the characters a bit more to do, namely one who ends up having a mental breakdown due to the stress of facing death. I'll also give him credit for an admittedly clever ending, probably the series' best. Plus, Tony Todd finally returned to the series, major points for that. Overall, Final Destination 5 is a decent entry into the series. It's also, as of today, the last entry. Once in a while, I might hear some news about a sequel or a reboot, but nothing concrete. And honestly, I'd be down for another one, maybe even a few more. I do think they're at the point right now where they gotta find a way to tweak the concept and premise a little bit in order to keep it from going stale, but I still think there's enough potential here, so yeah, if they want to bring this one back, I'm totally on board for that.
I'll see you soon.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you enjoyed all the horror reviews throughout October, and I'll see you again next Monday.